And right now we are joined by Paweł Zerka, Senior Policy Fellow at European Council on Foreign Relations. Good evening and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening.
Now, looking at the exit polls, I mean, we have been talking about the past, how the European Parliament did in the past, but now we're opening a new chapter. We're seeing some exit polls and the new numbers. How do you think this is going to impact the future of the new European Parliament?
I think those elections are already having a huge effect on European politics, and we see it most of all in the case of France, where I'm based. Nobody expected Emmanuel Macron to take such a radical measure, and he has just announced that he will dissolve the National Assembly and call new legislative elections after his party lost hugely towards the party of Marine Le Pen, and after the leader of the list of Marine Le Pen suggested that dissolving the National Assembly should be the decision to be taken by the president of France. My French colleagues, French journalists, which I've been talking, are all in the state of shock after that decision. But we should actually get used to the fact that Macron is a disruptor. He disrupted the French national scene back in 2017 when he won the election, despite the fact that he didn't represent any of the major parties. And now he disrupts it again. He hopes that by calling those early national legislative elections, he could re-legitimize himself. Otherwise, if he were to govern for the rest of his presidency, that means until 2027, in the shadow of the victory of Marine Le Pen, it could make it very difficult for him to actually govern the country. So once again, for me, those elections are important already in the extent to which they impact national politics in member states. France is one case. Another, a little bit softer case, but still important, is Germany, where we have a coalition government, and all of the three coalition parties have lost the number of seats in the European Parliament. We can see that AfD, the far-right party, has gotten more votes than many expected, whereas the center-right, CDU-CSU, has actually confirmed that they are the most likely winner of the next year's parliamentary federal election in Germany. But that also means that the coalition government in Germany is very deliberated. They will govern for the next year in the shadow of the result of today's election.
So obviously with these predictions, we are looking at possibly some major shifts, definitely some reshuffles coming domestically, but also affecting the EU. You mentioned what is going to happen in terms of the National Assembly in France. You mentioned the domestics of it, but what does it mean, the dissolvement of the National Assembly by Emmanuel Macron for Europe and for its stability?
I think it means that France will focus for the next few weeks on national politics and not on European politics, because the election is supposed to take place, the first round of that election at the end of June and the second round on the 7th of July. I think that means it's unlikely that Macron would agree to choosing the next European leadership already at the upcoming European summit at the end of June. I think that this prospect of French legislative elections means that we will have to wait for the decision as to whether Ursula von der Leyen will stay in her role, or should we have a new Ursula at the helm of the European Commission. We might have to wait until September, because the French politics will be so much focused on national politics and not so little on the European one.
Mm-hmm. Now, many of the non-EU member states are also observing these elections. For example, Ukraine. Now, when it comes to dissolvement of the French government, what does it mean for Ukraine? What do you think Zelensky is feeling right now?
No, it's not dissolvement of the French government, but just of the parliament in France, and with the hope that the result could still be of that legislative election could be promising for the government. So I think that for the moment the effects on Ukraine are quite unclear. It's important to remember that the legislative elections in France. The system of those elections is quite complex, and it's not simply an election in which a party which scores 30% in European elections or has a candidate in the person of Marine Le Pen who scores almost 50% in presidential elections, they still struggle to get enough parliamentarians in order to make a difference. So it's still very possible that those elections will allow Macron to recover his position, to take the second breath, and to avoid governing in the shadow of today's result. So if that gets confirmed, that result could be promising for Ukraine, because that will allow Macron to continue being a strong European leader, and he is currently one of those who are strongly supportive of Ukraine. However, if as the result of the legislative election in France, we get more political divisions inside the country and a cohabitation government, then the voice of Macron in European politics will matter less. In a very radical scenario where Marine Le Pen manages to take part in the next French government because of a strong result in the legislative election, it is even possible that she, together with Emmanuel Macron, would attend the European Councils. And that would mean that the voice of France at the European Council will no longer be that supportive of Ukraine, because Macron would have to coordinate with the new government. But again, I need to stress that this is just the most radical of the scenarios that could be considered right now. For me, it's more probable that the next government would rather allow Macron to regain the second breath.
Well, those are obviously only predictions, but we need to be looking at different possible scenarios taking place. And obviously, there are certain trends that are supposedly appearing when we're looking at the exit polls and we're looking at the possible results. It is clearer than ever that the European Union actually needs unity, because at our very own door, we have an ongoing war on our very continent. Do you think that the final results that could come out in days to come when it comes to this EU parliamentary election could keep the members closer together, or are they going to push them apart?
I think that it's important to see that those elections are not just about the European Parliament, and we will most likely have a European Parliament which moves to the right, but which also includes a growing number of far-right parliamentarians who are very often against various European politics and policies, and also against supporting Ukraine. And therefore,
so
in the European Parliament,
it might be the European Union.
So I didn't hear your question very well.
So what? Let me repeat that. So what would this mean for the European Union if this is going to happen?
Well, sorry, we'll see. I think that there is, of course, a risk that we'll have growing divisions, and that risk comes not just from the European Parliament, but also from the national elections that will happen. Now we know that they will also happen in France, but there are other countries like Austria, where in the legislative elections scheduled for later this year is the far-right party who is leading in the polls. So there is a risk that in the European Council, where heads of government are meeting, we will see growing division. But I think that this result also is an opportunity to correct the course of the European Union in order for the pro-European parties, for the European mainstream to make bigger efforts in order to recover the confidence of the European citizens in the European Union. So I wouldn't be only negative looking at those results. I think that they can also serve as a cold shower, which would force the European mainstream to make bigger efforts.
Thank you so much, Paweł Zerka, Senior Policy Fellow, European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you for joining us.